And we are live. Welcome, everyone. My name is Hafsat Akani, and I'm the program manager here at Leadership Brainery. Thank you all so much for joining us for the first episode of our Diversifying Postgraduate Education series, Law School Admissions. We encourage you all to ask questions and engage with one another through the chat and polls. And so a little bit about Leadership Brainery. We are a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to closing opportunity and wealth gaps by increasing the number of BIPOC and first-generation college students being accepted, enrolled, and graduating from postgraduate education programs, and then being recruited into high-wage careers. And so each year, the American Bar Association releases a report on the demographic information of state bar associations. The data that my colleague Catherine is putting in the chat includes the percentage of resident active attorneys by race and ethnicity. Hawaiian and Pacific Islander accounts for less than 1%, Native American accounts for less than 1%, Asian 2%, Latinx 5%, Black 5%, and white 86%. I think it's important that we use this data to draw attention to the systemic issues surrounding legal representation and the lack of transparency in reporting diversity statistics. The statistics reported from the ABA include data from 31% of state agencies and associations. It does not include information from all practicing attorneys and all state bar associations. And so with all that being said, I'll pass it over to Catherine, who will share a little bit more about why Leadership Brainery does the work that we do.
Thanks, Hafsat. Greetings, everyone. I'm Catherine Wong. I'm LB's Director of Equity Implementation. At LB, we envision a day when competitive graduate and professional school classrooms throughout the country are enriched by an equitable representation of first-generation and diverse students, and who upon graduation are prepared and empowered to lead and transform our country's workforce. As we begin today's conversation, we want to also acknowledge the emotional toll and challenges of the last few weeks, and emphasize how important it is to have leaders like you at the table with us. The format of today's interactive panel is as follows. We have several DEI questions that we've prepared for our panelists. We're going to be taking Q&A from the audience, and then we also have a raffle for those of you here today that have signed up with us through LB Connect. We also will have you'll have an opportunity, if you want, after the session is panel is over, to network, do a one-to-one peer networking for 30 minutes. There'll be a poll posted so that we can assess your interests. Now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome and invite our three esteemed panelists to introduce themselves. And I believe John is going first.
Yes. So first off, it is a tremendous honor to be here and to experience and to actually be a part of just the tremendous work that the Leadership Brainery is conducting, and to connect with the participants today. So just thank you for inviting me. My name is John Perdue. I'm the Director of Recruiting and Diversity Initiatives at Yale Law School. I actually joined in October. And before joining, I was on faculty and the pre-law program director at Florida A&M University in Tallahassee, Florida, HBCU. And I did that work for about 8 years. And I still consider it probably the greatest honor of my life, though I am very happy with the work that I'm able to do now. But naturally, just through my own progression throughout the profession, as well as just my professional work in these spaces, I can't think of a more important and substantive mission that needs to be fulfilled in terms of addressing some broader, long-standing issues and really just to move this country forward. I think we're all just tired of having the same conversations over and over and dealing with the same stuff over and over. So I'm just really glad to be here.
Thank you, John. You get to pick who goes next.
Oh, well, I do believe that'll be Mrs. Carla.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carla Anderson. I am Director of Operations for Admissions and Financial Aid and Director of Access Initiatives at the University of Pennsylvania Carey Law School, also known as Penn Carey Law. And I co-sign everything that John said. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm so happy to be able to answer your questions, to kind of demystify the law school admissions process, and just answer whatever questions you may have about your law school journey. Monique.
It's my turn. Hello, everyone. I am absolutely thrilled, and I think, John, you put it really well. Incredibly honored to be able to share space with you all today. My name is Monique Atkinson. I'm an admissions officer at Harvard Law School, and while law school admissions is so close to my heart, educational equity and thinking about the barriers to access for students across the board, across identities that are underrepresented is something that wakes me up in the morning. And so I think I'm so honored to share space with our panelists, Carla and John, and to really chat about what you're all curious to know, and to be of help in any way that I can. Hello, and I'm excited to spend the hour with you all.
Great, thank you. Our first question is, why is Leadership Brainery's mission important to you? And we can start with any one of you.
There's always like the big pause. So I'll just jump in. But that'll give time for John and Monique to come up with really great answers. So I'll be the guinea pig. But no, seriously, you know, having a mission where you want to try to even the playing field, where you are interested in promoting equity in a certain industry, is always important. And from a law school's perspective, we are all concerned with diversity as well. We're concerned with having engaging in pipeline programs, organizing, hosting pipeline programs so that people can be prepared when they get to the stage of their journey where they are actually applying to law school. We want you guys to have all of the information that you need to make the best decisions for yourself. And frankly, one of those decisions may be that you decide that law school is not quite what you wanted, and you may go a different path. But the mission of the Leadership Brainery in making sure that you all have access, that you all have information, that you are making connections in at many different levels is truly invaluable. So I applaud the Leadership Brainery for having that as their mission and existing in that space so that you all can really get what you need.
I'll go ahead and mute myself. Tough act to follow with Carla, but I echo your thoughts, and not the only one, obviously, in this room with that holds this truth. But as a first-generation college student myself, a child of immigrants and a woman of color, I hold kind of a personal appreciation for the work that the Leadership Brainery and the whole host of organizations who dedicate themselves to this work do, because there are significant barriers and structural barriers to access within education writ large, and that's not a secret. And what we can do to make sure that you have the resources, the supports, and the access, right? The access to the folks in this room, to each other, to community, to collective power, those are all really important things. And you deserve to have them, and you deserve to have success. And so I think that there are a lot of words and maybe signals in our society that say that some students don't get to have those things, but you absolutely do. And so the Leadership Brainery providing that and being a beacon of that is incredibly important. And I think to all of us. So that's my thought. John, over to you.
Yeah, I would just want to add, and first, thank you, Carla and Monique, for sort of laying things out there in these really brilliant ways. So I'm just going to try to emulate to the best of my abilities. But I'm going to lean on my experience as a professor, especially in political science. After I left the practice, that's what I went into. And the power resources were always like information, time, and money, and really sort of in that order. And one thing that you see in society that sort of perpetuates, I think, the disparities that we all experience is information hoarding. And, and when you look at the wealthy people, when you look at Wall Street, they spend a premium, they spend a mint trying to get the best information. That's why insider trading is technically illegal if we ever decide to enforce that. But, and so that was always the gap that we were trying to fill at FAMU in my previous position. And that's why I was so happy when I connected with Dean Ingbert to be able to be on the other side of the equation. Simply because this is an opportunity, for all the participants here and through this organization to share the absolute best information. And if you go on Reddit, not saying I do or anything about that, but there's this market out there of people just trying to learn as much as they possibly can about the best way to target their energy and target their effort. So one of the great myths in America is that we have this lack of talent or ambition, and that's just not true. It's a lack of opportunity. Some of it artificial, some of it natural. And it's really about a large population just trying to figure out the most efficient and effective way to target their efforts, to sort of maximize the likelihood that they could achieve whatever outcome they're looking for, and to not waste a lot of time and money, quite frankly, because I think when you talk about representation, socioeconomic factors always, play into that. And, mistakes are very expensive now in America, says the former consumer bankruptcy lawyer. We have made it almost prohibitively expensive now to make any kind of error. And you see it in the stress I think we experience with our students, and then with the applicant pool. And so I could go on, so I'm just going to stop there. But clearly, I believe fully in the mission of the Leadership Brainery. Thank you.
I'm also snapping away. Thank you so much, everyone. Really, really amazing responses. So the second question we have for you all is, how does your law school define diversity, equity, and inclusion, and why is it important? And I will let whoever wants to go take it away.
I'll start this time. The first thing I would say is, at YLS, but also I'm sure at Penn and Harvard, we sometimes forget the faculty, and the faculty are lifelong learners. And, for them to remain at the top of their fields, they want to be engaged, right? They want to be exposed to the cutting edge. They want to know what's new, what's current. They want to stay on top of their game. And so having recently joined Yale, one of the refreshing things that I encountered was how important diversity, equity, and inclusion are to our faculty core, because they understand the value of representation, not just in ethnic, religious terms or racial terms, but also ideological representation, and how fruitful just having a rich environment is to their own growth as academicians, but also to the output of our institution. And so it's actually been a mission of Yale since we had our DEI working group that was formed about 5 years ago to really work and make strides in the quality of representation that you find at Yale. So it oftentimes goes beyond just, checking boxes in terms of racial, ethnic categories, regional diversity. This touches on so many different levels here. And that to me is rewarding, right? And ultimately, if we have a large pool of people who have really done the work, right? They just did the work that was necessary to make them truly competitive, very strong applicants, then, that's what we're looking for. That's what we're committed to. We want to be able to open that door and to give, opportunities. But we also want to recognize there's a lot on our part that we have to maybe, what's the best way to put it? We have work to do on our end, because maybe we didn't always present ourselves as the most open institution. And so we're just really trying to be proactive, because we can't open a door if you don't knock. And so it keeps us up at night. Kept me up at night at FAMU when my students wouldn't take the chance on themselves at institutions like Yale. And it keeps us up at night now that I'm at Yale, because we know you're out there.
I'll go. Also, John, similarly beautiful kind of sharing of a really important piece of the work we do is that we are consistently looking to do the work that we need to do. It's work that all institutions need to do consistently and reflexively, and make it a part of our everyday work, because it's consistently evolving. And it's very important. And I think that for one other part of when I think of diversity, equity, and inclusion, that importance of diversity of perspective, of thought, of lived experience that John really brought up, but also this when folks arrive and when we get folks to our community and when they begin to integrate into community, how are we making sure that folks are supported and that across their identities they have what they need to be the excellent law student that we know that they can be. And so this equity and inclusion piece of making sure that students have mentorship and that they know who to go to and not assuming that they know who to go to when they need supports because they may not have had a lawyer in their family, or they may not know how to navigate an institution like Harvard or Yale or Penn. And so being able to make sure that we guide them through that process, providing mentorship, providing community supports from faculty to students to staff, and having consistent conversations. John mentioned the working group at Yale. We also have had a working group, and making sure that alumni, students, faculty, and staff are included in those conversations so that we ask the people who we are trying to deliver equity and inclusion to, the community at large, what does that look like for you? What are your needs? And so those are important, I think, additional pieces that I think about a lot in terms of once we have our diverse class across identity and experience, what are the resources that we're connecting folks with?
And I'll just continue on, some of the trains of thought that John and Monique have brought up. One particular point that John was speaking about, where he said, we all need to do better. We all, are trying to think of ways in which to really increase our diversity and be more proactive in, getting information and knowledge out to diverse communities. And if you think about it, we're talking about, considering someone who's older, which is me, we're talking about, 20 years ago, law school was very heavily just white. And in the early part of even the 2000s, there kind of was this more awareness of the gender disparities, and we need to really step up and really encourage women to apply to law school. So now we're maybe in the last 10 years there's been like these concerted efforts to really expose underrepresented communities to the law and to the possibility of law school. And so I think that, for as long as these institutions have been around, 18 whatever, and you think about all those years where it was kind of white men. And there's nothing wrong with white men, but, the world is full of more than just white men. And so, even though schools may have had it might have been part of their mission about diversity, and in theory, they want to be more diverse, but there have definitely been deliberate steps in the last decade to create an environment that is more conducive to diverse groups coming to law school, being comfortable, getting the support they need, not feeling alienated, not feeling as if they're the only one. And some of that has come from schools formalizing different, positions in a law school, such as you might have a diversity officer at a law school now, or formalizing specific programs that are for underrepresented groups, like pipeline programs. And so, I am encouraged by even just some of the strides that have been made in the last decade, having been in law school admissions for about 32 years. And it takes time because we're trying to put effort into the pipeline. And for you all, the pipeline is more immediate because you're maybe in college right now, or you're a recent grad and you're thinking about law school like within the next year. But the pipeline really needs to start like in elementary school, in high school, with community colleges even, who sometimes get left out of the equation as far as being targeted for, let's get information out there. So, you know, every school really has improved a lot, and some of that is peer pressure. But I think that a lot of schools are really doing a lot of great things and making a lot of great strides in increasing the diversity at their schools. For Penn Carey Law, you know, I would reiterate the same things that John and Monique are saying. You know, faculty want to have diverse classrooms because they want to really encourage a rich discussion in the classroom. When you are in class, that white male is going to learn something from you and the way you view the world and the way you view a particular issue that's being discussed in class, that will arm them with the capability of being able to work with diverse clients when they go into their career. So just think about the fact that you're providing a service when you get into law school. So, you know, there's support there for you. A lot of law schools have formalized their support for underrepresented students. Again, so they don't, you know, have that alienating feeling or like that feeling of I'm the only one here. So I think that's really encouraging. And there is a lot of support out there for you.
Sorry.
If you don't mind,
No, go.
Could I just
Please.
piggyback? I applied to law. I'm in my early 40s. I actually went through that application process 20 years ago and started in law school 20 years ago. And I have to reiterate, I think, you know, not to speak generally, but I think we can make a general statement that law schools have improved significantly in terms of just representation, their outreach efforts. Oftentimes, you know, back then, they were well-intentioned, but just didn't have the ear or the muscle memory, I'd say, for really connecting with populations, had no understanding. And so, you know, maybe kind of created more fires than they were hoping to put out. And I think, so law schools have grown certainly more sophisticated. Now having been on both sides of the equation, I think there's a lot of difficulty just in terms of resources. And there's over 3,000 colleges, universities in this country. There's so many different groups, there's so much intersectionality, and there's so many bad habits that have to be unlearned just from, you know, sort of centuries of like these dominant sort of a patriarchy or misogyny or whatever you want to call it that have just created the country the way it is. And it's difficult and it's fairly messy to sort of unwind, right? And so I think there's a level of persistence that, you know, that I think I'm eager to see being on the other side of the equation, but I was always sort of challenged law schools when I was at FAMU. You're always eager to see if there's persistence, because oftentimes these fires sort of flare up and then they fade away. And so, you know, I'm just thankful to have this opportunity. And as I've been growing into my own role, I can think of all the amazing people like Monique and Carla and so many other people that I was able to encounter even when I was a pre-law program director. And I could point to these people at these spaces, right, at my peer institutions and say, listen, there's a lot of tremendous work. There's some people who are very committed and they've been at this for years, or they're definitely invested for the long haul. And, I think a lot of these schools, if they wanted to do a hard pivot and go in some other direction, would have to drag us out kicking and screaming. It just wouldn't, and I think the people that hired us knew that, which is why they hired us, and perhaps stack the deck, as it were, in favor of making progress and maintaining those momentum. But I just want to reiterate that, because as you were speaking, Carla, I was remembering my application process and self-selecting out of so many schools, including my own employer, just because there was nothing really that existed at the level or degree that we have now. Doesn't mean that we don't need to keep take our foot off the gas. We need to keep plowing along, but wanted to put that out there.
No,
yes. We've kicked the door open and we're not letting it close.
Well, I think that leads us really well into our next question, which is, now that the door is open, now that the pipelines have been established, and like you said, John, right? Like, it's not that candidates are not there. It's not like BIPOC and first generation applicants, students. We're here. It's a matter of being able to find and support us. Our next question is, who is your ideal candidate? What are you looking for at your schools?
I can start with this one because I've been evading going first. I'll take this one to start. So we get this. I'm sure all of us get this question quite a bit. What does an ideal student look like? Because it's a good question, and I think there are different perspectives on what would make a good lawyer. But for me, when I think of this question, I go, I am an educator by trade. I studied education, and I think of trait theory and role theory in education, and the idea that you have to have particular traits and you have to have a certain style to be a good lawyer. And while law is not my field, I have come to know through students and faculty so many amazing advocates and so many amazing future and current lawyers and legal academics who are vastly different. And so when I think about something that you need to be or what would make you ideal for law, again, I defer to the lawyers in the room, but I would say that I wouldn't try to shape yourself to a particular ideal mold is the advice I have when I think of that question. Because A, I want you to be you when you apply to law school, because you are going to have to do law school. You're going to have to go through it. And it's my job in many ways is to get to know you as best I can. And so there are many layers to why if a student were to try to be the ideal applicant that I described, it wouldn't come together well, because I'm like, well, I'm getting a sense that this is who they are, but I also have this feeling that they're adding these other elements, and I have questions. So I want to know you and who you are, and I think some things that I've seen in really strong applications, that being said, are that level of authenticity, that level of, I'm really passionate about this. And you don't have to say it explicitly all the time. There are folks who I read their resume and I'm like, they were born ready for law school. This is what they wanted to do their whole life. I have people where I have to get to their personal statement in the application to really get a sense for that passion, and it comes out beautifully there. And there are people where it's weaved in throughout, and vice versa. And so there's no particular application or line or experience or thing that you need to be an ideal applicant, because there's not one kind of legal student and therefore not one kind of lawyer that you'll become. Another thing though that I think of before I pass the mic is your understanding in terms of like what I hope that you have gathered when you apply to law school is why. It isn't a trait, it isn't a thing that you need to be, but I have learned that your motivation for law school is in many ways what sets your path, helps you make decisions in the moment about what you would like to do in terms of courses and in terms of opportunities, of which you will have many, which I'm very excited about. And also in those hard moments when law school gets difficult, because I've heard it's very, very hard in terms of the reading and the courses and just it's a degree, you want to remember your why. And so when I'm reading applications, I want to know that you know what your why is. I am glad that you know it, and you don't have to necessarily prove to me that it's your why. I will believe you. But knowing that you have your why helps us as admissions folks feel that we know that you know why you're doing this, and this is really what you would like to do. So those are my thoughts, and then I'll pass it over to Carla or John.
I'll go next. Gotcha before you could click on the unmute, John. So I will say that when we are evaluating applications, we are basically trying to answer two questions. The first question is, are you academically fit? And that is, pretty objective. We can see the standardized test scores. We can see your cumulative GPA and review your transcript and see how well you've performed throughout your academic time as an undergraduate. But the second question that we are answering is, are you a good fit for our school? And that, of course, is a much harder thing to kind of quantify. It's based on very subjective factors. It's based on when you do a holistic review of a particular applicant, you read everything that's available, their essays, their letters of recommendation. You're looking at, what kind of major they chose to challenge themselves with. Organizations they've been involved in, leadership roles, this as full a picture as we can get of kind of who you are. That is a very, subjective thing as far as when an individual reader is reviewing someone's application materials. It's the overall kind of feeling that we get about that person. Do we, as an admissions reader, get excited about this particular applicant and are excited and intrigued and interested in how they would use the opportunities that are available at our particular law schools? And so when so often applicants are asking us, well, what are you looking for? Or what's your idea of the ideal Penn Law student or Yale or Harvard student? It's impossible for us to answer that question. And I think it's because as the applicant, you know yourself, you know what you have to offer, and you're thinking about all the kind of details about yourself. And so understandably, you are looking for us to check off the boxes that you have to hopefully give you some idea of, what the possibilities could be for that particular law school. And unfortunately, when you apply to a program, it's not just that you're competing against yourself as far as what you have to offer. It's that you are also competing against all these other applicants. And so for you, you kind of see it as, I am applying to this law school, and that law school. For us, we see thousands and thousands of people. And on the one hand, when we're reading a file, we're zeroed in to that person and we are paying attention to that person. We're looking at that person's particular details. But we also are keeping in mind that this person is going to be part of a whole. And so we're keeping our eye on the big picture. We're thinking about the 100 other files we've just read and comparing you to those people. And that's just life, where it's kind of like there's always usually for higher education, there's more demand than there are spots, to make it simple. But bringing it back to what can you do and what should you try to put out there? Monique nailed it. It's being your authentic self. Don't let anyone tell you what they think you should say in your application. You know you better than anybody else. And what you're trying to do is to offer yourself as this unique person with your unique characteristics that have to do with academics, that have to do with personal experiences, work experiences, internships, volunteer stuff, your ideology, as John mentioned earlier. That whole thing is your package. And we are, a lot of times very excited about these individual people. So you really have to just be your authentic self. And it's not so much that if someone tells you, oh, it would be really great if you talked about this in your personal statement, or it would be really great if you majored in this in undergrad, or it would be really great if you did this particular legal internship. None of that is going to guarantee you admittance to law school. Now, if you're interested in that internship for yourself, then that could be of value to you. And that could be something that you can show as one of your experiences, that maybe a combination of things is not going to be the same as any other applicant. So I think applicants kind of in their mind set themselves up for failure when they're trying to find out what is it they're looking for. What can I do? Who can I be? When you just need to be yourself. Yourself is good enough. Now, it may not be that it will get you into the school that you want, but sometimes it's just volume, unfortunately. And that's a harsh thing to have to accept and to kind of go into the admissions process knowing that that is a part of it. But I just encourage you to, say to yourself, I'm good enough. I'm more than good enough because I'm fabulous. And I'm going to apply to this school and I think I'm going to get in. And then if you don't get in, then, just deal with it then. But go in with a positive attitude and make sure you're setting yourself up for success, that you're doing the things that you need to do in order to set yourself up for success in the application process. So I'm going to stop talking because I can really ramble, and I'll let John say a couple things.
Well, no, first off, Monique and Carla kind of nailed it. I'll add our spin to it. So strong applicants, right? They know what they can control in the process and what they cannot, right? And you cannot, under any circumstances, control what else, who else is applying and what they've done and all that other stuff. The only thing you should really concern yourself with when you think about the rest of the applicant pool is assume that they've done the things that you were supposed to do. Assume that, if it's a competitive program, that they went all in and put their best foot forward on the GRE or the LSAT. Assume that, they're showing up to class faithfully. They're doing the work. They're engaging. They're always sort of putting their best foot forward on the nuts and bolts, just the fundamental things that, any applicant serious about attending any law school should demonstrate. But also little things. Assume that they are following our instructions on our application. Okay, we all have our own unique little bespoke essays or what have you, and it is so obvious when one has been repurposed, and very little effort's been put in to sort of take our individual processes seriously. But I know internally at Yale, and I know it's true at Harvard, and I know it's true at UPENN, and all of our other peer institutions, we are very intentional in how we design that application and in the information that we request to help us make a decision about fit for our institution, to piggyback off of what Carla was saying. And so do the things we ask you to do. We're not trying to torture you, we're actually trying to help you, help us, help you. And so just, those are the things that stand out. And second, the language we use internally when we're discussing files, how well formed is this applicant? And that doesn't mean that they know, as Monique referenced, some people are just born in a Brooks Brothers suit and, you just know, right? But in a lot of cases, it's a gradual, transition to where you identify that law school is the next right step for you. And so it may be clear that eventually maybe law is a good fit for you, but why is it the best fit for you now? And that's something we do have to consider when you have so many tremendous applicants, right? Is it better? And so, and sort of keeping in that line of thought, it's those applicants who are just very comfortable and confident in their journey. They're not overconfident. They're not arrogant. I mean, we want to know that you can succeed academically. We want to get a sense of the contribution you'll make. We also want to know that you're nice, because our law school is very small. And law school in and of itself is stressful and anxiety inducing and can be very competitive. And nobody wants to throw a grenade, into their own community. And, but finally, we want to know that this is the right thing for you to be doing now. And our strongest applicants, believe it or not, aren't the ones who worked for Obama or, I don't know, cured COVID, though that would be awesome if you could do that and get us out of this mess. But really, they're the ones that convince us that they're going to succeed academically, that we're just not worried about that. We can envision them within our ecosystem, within our community, as a positive attribute, that they're nice. We can tell they're nice. And because you'd be surprised how recommenders will give us clues if you were not nice. And finally, we know this is just right for them. And that's it. And if you notice, there's nothing glamorous there. They were Navy SEALs who also, there's none of that crazy stuff that you think. Those applicants are out there, but you have no control over that. So forget about them and just really lean into forming your story and your narrative and knowing yourself well enough that you can hit those points, to the best of your ability. And don't look for guarantees. Don't look for guarantees. That's not what life is about anymore. I know it's expensive and I know it's stressful, but no guarantees in this process. Be comfortable with that, and just have faith that you just put the best foot forward that you could possibly put.
Is it all right if I add one quick note? You both inspire me so much. I just want to get one more thought out. Is that okay? I think such excellent advice on kind of what to think about when you're thinking about your application and being an applicant. And I think one question that came to mind for me is how do students need to do it? Not necessarily what do I need to be and what do I need to do? How do I portray these skills and these things about me in my application? And I got really good advice from a Harvard Business School student that I would like to share because we're sharing advice. And she phrased that your application should be like a portfolio. So when you think about your resume, where do your accomplishments maybe speak for themselves? For your personal statement, which is in many ways my favorite part of the application because I get to hear you speak, and it makes me very happy to get to hear your voice. Where do I speak best for myself? How do you ask that question? What did my resume take care of? Where do people I trust or people that mentored me speak well on my behalf, and who do I want to do that? And so I think when you think about your application as a whole, that's telling stories in different places, what chapters are going to get what pieces of information, that can be helpful in kind of crafting, this is what you need to know about me. I am great, I am fabulous, as Carla said. Here is how I'm going to display it to you. That can be a really helpful question to consider as you eventually go on to craft an application to law school.
Great. Thank you all so much for that fantastic advice. I'm shifting gears a little bit to talk about retention, right? So you've done the work, you've applied, and you're in. And so I'm curious to know if you can all share a little bit about, what do your institutions do? So what are your formal and informal efforts that you take to increase retention rates for BIPOC and first generation college students? What methods do you all have? Are there any pipeline programs that you guys use in particular, faculty advising, and so on and so forth?
Yep, I guess it's my turn to go first. So think of all the things. So like many law schools, we do have like an academic support program. And, that involves, whatever support a student needs. So let's say we're talking about physical support. for a disability. Or we're talking about kind of emotional mental support. We have, at Penn Law, for instance, we have an in-house counselor, and we started that 2 years ago. We're lucky to, when you think about all the law schools that are out there, some are standalone institutions. We're lucky to be a part of a larger institution, just like Yale and Harvard. So there's a lot of resources for students in general. And of course, there are counseling, there's a whole counseling, part of the university that's available for students. But we really realized a couple of years ago that we needed a counselor to be on site at the law school, in person, have open office hours where people could just walk in when they were feeling overwhelmed. And so we implemented that a couple of years ago. And we've also done other kinds of wellness things. We've renovated a part of the law school, and it's known as the wellness suite for students. Like there's a foosball table in there and some other types of things, but comfortable couches and nice lighting, someplace to kind of take yourself out of, the I'm in class type of environment. Our faculty have open door policies. So they allow students to contact them directly, and they may have open office hours where you can go directly, just pop in at certain times. Or if you want to make an appointment, you just, contact the professor directly to make that appointment. We also have a lot of first generation professionals initiatives. We talk a lot about first generation college, but the other side of first generation college when you're at this level is that there are first generation professionals. So yes, their parents may have gone to obtain an undergraduate degree, but they have no idea what this, kind of professional type of education realm is all about. And so those students are just like first generation college students in that they may feel a little lost and not know where to begin and not know, quite how to navigate, especially once they get into law school. And again, it's that feeling of belonging, having spaces that if you are kind of in this population, if you are first generation college and or first generation professional student, that you kind of have these spaces to go to where you will find like students to share experiences or just to share kind of support. So there's a lot of programming that we've implemented over the last decade and formalized, if you will, because we all have these things that we just do, but maybe this person is like the registrar, but actually they're like the law school counselor as well for all things emotional and things like that. So, you have people that have naturally taken on kind of roles, or they're the person to go to. Students kind of pass the word type of thing. But, we all as law schools have really formalized a lot of things in the last decade for first generation students and along the lines of wellness. And being more proactive about that. So, there's academic support, different offices do different things. For instance, our career planning office has many workshops where they, show students how to, do document discovery, which they'll, have to do when they get into different positions, internships, work after law school. Or it could be something as simple as how to use Excel that in a law firm environment and that kind of thing. So of course, like many law schools, we have mentoring programs. A lot of our affinity groups, of which our Black Law Students Association, our BALSA, is top notch. as I'm sure Monique and John will say about theirs as well. But they really, we do what we do. They really, make sure that incoming students are paired with an upper level student, so that they have that kind of upper level student mentor. They will hold exam support sessions, preparing for exams, learning how to outline, or just putting together study groups and things like that, so that as a 1L, you really are kind of supported so that you can fully acclimate to the law school environment. So there's administrative things we do, there's things that students do, there's things that faculty do. And I know I'm missing a whole bunch of things, but that's just an idea of some of the things that you can expect when you go to law school. Oh, I found another little, just a tidbit. Another thing our faculty does is they have brown bag lunches in the fall semester of the 1L year, where, in small group settings, different faculty will hold a lunch. You got to sign up for it. And then that faculty will have lunch with like 15 students or something. And they'll be able to talk about that faculty person's scholarship or the book they're writing, their research, that kind of thing. And that's a great way in an informal environment to start to get to know different faculty members, and what kind of their specialties are and what they're passionate about and what the work that they do. So that's another little thing. So I'll let John or Monique go next.
Oh, happy to go, John. He gave me the eye. I was like, are you? Love it. So I think there are so many things that we could all say about initiatives that are kind of close to our hearts, and things that are really important for students across identities to have the supports that they need. I think that I want to start with the academic, thinking about the fact that it is an academic transition for everyone. Law school, again, it's an intense learning environment. It is a different shift from maybe other undergraduate or graduate programs, even if you have had a previous degree or have had parents who have, or again, are completely new and first generation. Our dean at Harvard Law School, John Manning, is a first generation student himself, son of a single mother. Our dean of admissions, my boss, is a first generation student. I myself and several members of our admissions team have that lived experience as well. And so we know that there are lots of pieces to feeling prepared and supported as a first generation student and also as an underrepresented student. And so one piece that we begin with academically before students come to Harvard Law School, so before you even step foot on campus, one of our faculty section leaders, we'll talk more about, has developed a program that has become pretty widely used and was actually shared with other law school students beyond Harvard Law School this year and in the midst of the pandemic. What is 0L? And so in law school, you may have heard this many a time. 1L, 2L, 3L are your years of law school. 0L is a student who is matriculating into law school. And so 0L for Harvard Law School is a set of lectures taught by Harvard Law School faculty and recorded for students so that before they get to campus, if you are not familiar with the branches of government because your civics education didn't necessarily cover it, if you don't know what the Socratic Method is and you're worried or nervous about it because it can be nerve-wracking, how does it work, why does it work? Fun fact, it was developed at Harvard Law School, so we're pretty well, we know what we're talking about on Socratic Method, and giving you kind of that initial understanding of here are the things that you're going to encounter so that they're not unfamiliar or scary or confusing, and also giving you connections to the faculty and the community who you can go to with questions on them because they are taught by our community and our faculty. Once you get to campus, we assign all of our students, as Carla mentioned, mentorship is a big part of making sure students are supported. We assign formal mentors to all our students. 2 are faculty, so you have a section leader. In 1L year, the section is a really important part of your experience across law schools, but these are your people that you'll take most of your first year law school classes with, and you have a section leader who is a faculty expert in their field. One of my favorite is at Harvard Law School is Glenn Cohen. He is the head of our Berkman Klein Center for the Petrie Flom Center for Bioethics and Health Law. too many centers. And he's an expert in his field, so students interested in health law, but also across fields, he knows who to connect you with so that you get the things that you need. And so he is one of our faculty section leaders. Additionally, we connect you with a faculty reading group leader, so someone specifically at Harvard Law School in your area of interest, and a small group of students, so that you can all have conversations about your area of interest, because across your identity, you're going to have something you're really passionate about, and we want you to get connected to that as well. We also assign you student mentors, officially a community student leader, or we have kind of student experience leaders who will actually be there for you to remember that you're a person, and that beyond the classroom, you are someone who has hobbies and enjoys life. And I think sometimes we think about law school and we think about the difficulty of it, but also remembering to take care of yourself and what that looks like from the law student perspective. Don't want to go on too long, but we also have book talks as well for our faculty, and faculty being able to connect with students across their experience, so that again, you can form those formal connections. Our Dean Manning will actually pay students to have lunch with faculty, because they just want you to be able to connect with them. In addition to that, we have our Dean of Students office, which is kind of our hub for student support. And so we have a fabulous student services team filled with a bunch of folks who will kind of work with you to tailor what your particular needs and accommodations might be, whether that's in terms of ability or experience. Maybe you are transitioning to having a family. Maybe you are experiencing some sort of hardship, being able to tailor what you need for your classes to the supports that they have as well, across mental health, wellness, physical health, and the like. And finally, before I pass it over to John, I think a really important support that kind of we have in addition to the formal ones are the connections between students. It is no surprise, Harvard Law School is very large. We are one of the largest of the large law schools. We are the largest top law school. And students sometimes wonder how I feel in that environment where there are so many people around me. One part of that is that you have so many different identities and experiences surrounding you, and so many different organizations dedicated to those experiences from the student perspective. So we do have our BALSA, our Black Law Students Association, which is fantastic. Carla, that was right. But we also have our Caribbean Law Students Association, and we have, which I'm a huge fan of as well as a child of Jamaican immigrants. They're fabulous, and their events have great food. Our African Law Students Association, we have our Latinx Students Association. We also have descendant students who are descendants of enslaved folks in the United States. And so there are many different communities, both affinity and interest-based, that flow from that large community that we have, where students can make those tighter connections and find their folks. And I'll also say that often, similarly to what Carla shared, they have their own mentorship supports within their organization. So you will be paired, for example, if even within our Women's Law Association, you will be paired with a big sister. In our Black Law Students Association, they have mentorship as well. So making sure you're covered on all fronts is a really big goal of ours. And with that, I will mute myself and pass it over to John.
All right, well, thank you, Monique and Carla. Here, to answer that question, I'll tell you, I had a similar question. I was interviewing for this job over the summer, and coming from an HBCU, and where most of my students were possibly first generation, either professional or college, but socioeconomic concerns were always sort of foremost in their minds. But also just worries of imposter syndrome and so forth. So I think so many of us come from these spaces, and the first thing we worry about is infrastructure. And I'm gonna say this, and I feel confident about saying this, just having absorbed what Carla has said about UPENN and what Monique has said about Harvard. And sort of the magic or the difference at spaces like our peer institutions is that a lot of that work is done informally. And so we oftentimes look for like these massive infrastructures. So I remember asked the question during the interview to Dean Ingber and the rest of the team. I'm like, well, what sort of infrastructure exists? And they stumbled through that answer. And I mess with them about this all the time. And I'm like, oh, wow, I don't know. And I remember telling my partner, I'm like, I don't know, Vanessa, I'm not sure. But then I get there and I start working at Yale, and now I'm intimately involved as we're bringing in the class of 2024, and we leverage our smallness, to the extent where, yes, there's a dean of academic affairs. Yes, we have these things there, but from the moment you get the phone call from Dean Ingberg, our team is going to work setting up this very robust, very significant, but in so many ways informal network and just support system. And, we get to know in almost kind of a creepy way as an admissions rep, right? You kind of understand who your applicants and then your admitted students are. You know so much about them. But, that information, that data collection really sort of drives us as we start thinking about what resources, and really those resources ultimately are people. And so what people do we need to connect you with to make you feel obviously confident about joining us, because we said yes, we want you to say yes too, but also to gather as much information that's really going to help you land on your feet wherever you land. Because I don't think any of our institutions, especially once you're admitted, believe in the hard sell, right? I think we understand that ultimately, this is such a personal decision. And the best way to help you make that decision is to be candid and to put resources in front of you that are open, honest. And so that's our process. And so I didn't understand that till I joined Yale. And then I started realizing as, I became more well-versed in how we roll out our admitted students program, or how we do our outreach, and how much of it just relies on like our personnel. And then our student body. One of the most inspiring things about my community, but I'm sure Carla and Monique will say the same about their institutions, is how eager the students are, regardless of their background, to connect. And sorry, we have a lot of motorcycles in Connecticut, as I've learned. How eager those students are to connect and to give back and to build on the communities that they've already worked so hard to join and form at their respective institutions. And so, yes, we have this, that, and the other thing, the formal stuff, but the magic, I think, at these institutions is the informal networks, and the fact that whether it's a large institution like Harvard or a small one or somewhere in between, that we know our institutions so well and we know our community so well because we've put the hard work into building very strong communities at our institutions. Obviously, no institutions without flaws in its own communities, but we have this abundance of resources that we're able to leverage to sort of build on that. So it's this really sort of informal, and it's the informal support systems, I think, that are extremely hard to explain. And that's why, my admissions team, I thought they fumbled the answer during the interview, but no, it's weird because it's such an organic process, certainly at Yale. And in a lot of ways, I think that should always offer encouragement as you start to do your due diligence. One of the things sometimes if you're trying to transition into a space, and these are privileged spaces where we work, let's just be honest about that, is that the world is very different. And I think we have a vision and we conceptualize a life in this new world, but we don't really know what that feels like or understand what it means to be part of it. So one thing that tends to frighten, people once they've paid their deposit is the academic freedom that you have at Yale. And, certainly we have resources to help you come up with a firm course, offering or selection that will help you get to whatever big firm or whatever the thing is you want to do. But if you think about it, we fight so hard in our lives and we do all the hard work to have options and freedom, right? And so you get into a space like, Harvard, Yale, or Penn, where now these opportunities really are sort of in front of you, and you can almost be overwhelmed sometimes by the abundance of resources that are in front of you. And so it's been a unique transition for me, but I would say the thing that I love the most, because I was thinking, man, how am I going to answer this question? was to hear how Carla and Monique really honed in on those sort of informal networks, those connections, and never discount the affinity groups and student organizations. I coordinate all of that during our admissions process and then our recruiting process. And, you know, we have our first generation professionals organization. We have, and just the amount of support and intentionality, I think, in their efforts. And then, quite frankly, the amount of input, you know, whether solicited or not, but they really push us to make sure that we're considering, you know, these populations and that we're approaching, you know, whatever respective population in a way that they believe is helpful and beneficial. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do if we really are trying to open up access to our institutions. So.
And
sure.
Go ahead.
You go. I will just quickly say, and I can speak probably for all of our institutions, I'm sure we would all say this, our students speak remarkably well for themselves. I snap it. And like, if you want to know what this experience is like, often our student organizations, they won't speak for any in particular, they will have pages on their websites that say for prospective students, or they have particular representatives connecting with prospective students. I know our Black Law Students Association, for example, they've connected me with students and vice versa. And they are happy to tell you the good, the bad, the holistic truth of their experience, and that's important too. So not to say they are definitely like taking exams and taking classes; they have full-time things to do, but they often will share their perspective, and honoring that is really important as well. That we are tasked with really sharing as much as we can about the experience, but never be afraid to hear what students have to say, because they are brilliant advocates for themselves and their communities.
And I just wanted to make a quick point about the fact that all of us keep talking about, you know, there's stuff that's formal, that's formalized, that there's a structure for it. And then there's other things that are just more organic. And, you know, as a plug to all the law schools that aren't here right now, don't discount a school that you're interested in because you go to their website and you see that, oh, wait, Penn and Harvard and Yale, they've got an Office of Diversity and Inclusion, but this school doesn't have an Office of Diversity and Inclusion. Don't assume that that would mean that you're not going to have support or that they're not doing diversity and inclusion work. So sometimes things aren't formalized yet. Sometimes schools don't have huge budgets where they can hire a person that has the title of diversity and inclusion. But that doesn't mean that there are not people at that law school that are doing the work, combinations of other administrators and faculty that may be very passionate about that and are doing the work. And that, you know, saying diversity and inclusion, that's just one example. I mentioned wellness. Don't assume that if a school does not have a web page that lists all the activities that they do for their students around wellness, that they're not aware of it, that they don't have things in place for students around wellness. They just may not have formalized it and put it out there for the public consumption in that way. So, you know, also don't limit yourself. Don't cut yourself short in your law school choices because you're comparing schools just based off of websites. What's invaluable is once you've been admitted,
Carla,
that you talk to admitted students and you get the nitty gritty from them, and they can talk, you know, forever on their experiences and the support or not that they have received.
That's great. Thank you all for your candor and for, you know, being able to talk about both the informal and formal ways of support and the application. We'd like to ask if you wouldn't mind just staying a few minutes so students could get some of their questions answered. And we have time, if you just have about 5 more minutes, to do 2 questions. When we were scrolling through the questions, one of the ones that comes up is, given everything that you've all said, how has things shifted with the pandemic in terms of whether it be the admissions process? There's been some questions related to, are you getting an influx of applications that you didn't have before? How has sort of virtual learning shifted? So we may not have time to hear from all of you because Hafsat's going to ask the other question, but if we could just hear from one or two of you about how the pandemic has affected law schools.
Okay, I'll go.
Okay.
Okay, you, and then Monique, you're going. I'll just say that absolutely, just like the whole world changed and had to adapt themselves to this kind of global situation, law schools were in the same boat. But at the baseline, everything then had to become virtual. So where we had these in-person events where people were getting together and being able to chat and, have this live discussion, we had to reimagine and revision that for the virtual environment. So like we are having a conversation now, I envision that this is actually going to become a part of now our day-to-day. So it's really a positive thing that out of all this tragedy and trauma and heartache, that something has happened organically that will actually make law school admissions better and will actually increase access. Because many schools that kind of didn't, were dipping their toe into the new technology of really expanding virtual events and things like that, well, we were forced to do it. So now that we have that tool in our toolbox, we're going to, just add it, fold it in when we go back to in person. So I envision that there will be virtual events, just like there will be in-person events available once the pandemic is over. But I think that just everyone speaking to the, I'm trying to think faster than I'm talking, thinking about the pandemic and how it has affected academics. We understand that a lot of students are worried about pass fails and things like that. Every other applicant is in the same boat. Basically, across the board, schools were relatively doing the same things. So you're still on that same playing field that we kind of evaluate students as far as their academics. So I wouldn't be so much concerned about that. Monique, I'll let you talk.
Carla brilliantly said everything that I would have hoped to say and better. But I think, just to echo really quickly, I think, I don't know if this ever is important to note, but we are experiencing the same pandemic as individuals and communities as everyone who is applying to law school or considering law school and the folks we interact with every day. And so in terms of our review process, we bring that context and that awareness of these years now that we're in have impacted people tremendously, have impacted us tremendously. And I think it has changed our world significantly. And so we take that context into our review process, because our review processes, from what I know of my colleagues as well, is contextually based. We are aware of the fact that you are a person, and we are taking that fullness with us when we review your application cover to cover. So know that we still have our admissions criteria and our thoughts that we've talked about earlier, but we also know that a pandemic is a pandemic. And if your internship was canceled, if you lost employment, if you lost loved ones, that we feel that and understand that, and also can take that into full consideration when reviewing your application. Most of our deadlines, I believe, for the fall of this upcoming year have passed, but for years to come, if you have something particular or specific that is outside kind of the realm of the pandemic has impacted me as it has impacted our world, and you would like to share that specifically with us, at least at HLS, feel free to submit that in an addenda. It does not have to be something expansive and really detailed, because we don't want you to re-traumatize yourself or anything like that. But if you feel that you want us to bring in additional context about this year, even if that's next year, telling us what happened and how that impacted you, if you feel it's relevant to your application, we are more than open to that as well, because context is definitely key. So I won't go on any further, but definitely echo Carla on that.
very quickly, I'm going to address the elephant in the room without exactly addressing the elephant in the room. I'm not going to say anything about our respective volume in terms of applicants, but what I will tell you is that's another factor that you cannot control, because this year it was COVID. It could, who knows what it could be. I mean, and so it's really about you preparing yourself and conditioning yourself to know when you are ready. And so the best and the strongest applicants have a strong sense of self. They're really well formed, and it translates, and it just oozes throughout the application in like this magical way. And you know, and whether they're KJD or they've taken 10 or 15 years in between. And so lean into yourself, get to know yourself, because you cannot control the rest of the world and what factors may increase or decrease applicant volume. One thing we've learned to do, like the rest of the world, is adapt, right? And I think there are a lot of, one of the advantages, believe it or not, of COVID is that if we're trying to increase our presence and our footprint, you know, and we recognize that there are spaces that we haven't touched, and we, you know, probably need to be, then not only do we have the technological capability and familiarity, you know, to do so, but we also are pretty confident that those other spaces have that as well, right? And that it's less of an ask for us to just set something up. And I know there's some people in the audience who've spent a Saturday with me doing exactly that thing. And so, you know, that's one thing that we've learned to do, to adapt as well. But the overall point stands. I mean, the elephant in the room just probably shouldn't be the elephant in the room, because you just can't control it. And all you can do is get yourself as prepared and as ready as you can be. And if you believe it's truly your time, then, you know, shoot your shot. And, you know, it's not like we don't enjoy looking forward to these amazing applications. It's not like that isn't the best part of our day, you know, even after 14-hour work days. And, oh, I've got about 6 hours. And yes, I've put in 20 hours before, just of file reading that I've got to do. But then we start reading the files, and then we read your story, right? And then we start rooting for you. You know, we're looking for ways to say yes. And even if it doesn't work out with our institution, we're still rooting for you, right? And so you just have to know that. And so that's all I'll say about it.
Speak on it, John.
We're all snapping in the back. And so I have one more question for you all. It's from another one of our panelists. And so this, one of our attendees, this question is about those who are not recent grads, and who worked in the field, who have not worked in the field that they want to practice law in. And so what exactly are you looking for in applicants with professional experience versus those who are recent grads? Apparently, there's a lot of talk about this demographic struggling more to get in. Is this a true or false rumor?
I can start, but I would definitely love to hear from John and Carla as well. At HLS, and this is different across law schools in terms of their breakdown, but about 80% of our entering 1L class has at least a year of work experience. Now, 60% have 2 or more years, and we keep going up from there. But it's actually, from what we've seen, it is a pretty common trend for folks to be actually getting more experience before they go to law school in general. Now, it wasn't always that way, and I don't have all the years of history, but from my time, at least in the JD admissions office, we have quite a few folks who are coming to law school with experience. And to be very honest, there are very few things at HLS that we preference. We actively preference, like as it on its face in the application process. Work experience is something that we actively preference, and that I can say is entirely true. The reason for that, and we talk about faculty, but just in general, bringing your experience in your field into the law school classroom, to the law school environment, that doesn't have to be work experience, but often that experience is super helpful for having conversations about how does this impact this professional workspace? What experiences have you had in that space? Is really, really something that can shine through someone's professional experience. We want the biomedical engineer to talk to the former, trying to think of someone else, the person who worked in tax. We want you to have those conversations about how the law implicated you both. And so it does enrich our classroom environment like many other factors, but it is one thing that we definitely don't hold against applicants in terms of what to share in your application. Again, that work experience is going to be looked at, and we want to know what exactly you were up to, what skill sets and lessons came from that, and how did that kind of impact your decision to apply to law school and fit within that. Sometimes that's a clean line. Sometimes that is a trajectory that's changed. And so getting to know how that work experience fits into your larger picture can be helpful, particularly if you've shifted a bit, because that happens for people all of the time. There are a lot of other things to think about, but I'll get off my soapbox and pass it to Carla if she's thoughts.
So what I would say is that we're kind of the same, that 72% of our class is coming in as 1Ls, and they've had 1 or more years of work experience. And, you know, having work experience is always something that just adds to your file. And so that's why sometimes it just gives an applicant that extra little sparkle. But it's not that we're preferring people with work experience at Penn. You know, people who are coming straight from undergraduate school, they have just as good a chance as anyone. They may also have, you know, work type of experiences that they've had through internships, and summer work that puts just as much of a sparkle on their application. So, but what I would say about, I think that what's great with the legal field and people who are thinking about going to law school is that they're finally realizing that they don't have to go to law school directly from undergrad. Because for law school, it's an advanced degree, but there's not this whole lead up of knowledge and coursework that you've taken that you need to retain, because it needs to roll over into that professional next level of professional education, like medical school, for instance. You don't want to wait 30 years to go to medical school, and you did your, you know, all your science classes in undergrad, and now you're like, oh, I don't know if I even remember all that stuff. So I think that's what's so great about, you know, a legal degree. That's why people, you know, they may decide, I just need a mental break. You know, I need to just not have to worry about when's the next test going to be. So I'm going to work for a couple of years before I go to law school. And that's a legitimate reason to wait to go to law school. So there could be many reasons. I think Monique said something about starting a family. You know, maybe, you know, people have different, you know, desires to how they want to shape their life, and then the law degree is just going to be a part of it. So, you know, that's why it is desirable. It is a positive for you to have work experience. And I don't know if that rumor is necessarily true, that it's harder for someone with work experience to get into law school.
We get that question and that concern from so-called non-traditional applicants, but then we also get a lot of very panicked questions from, you know, KJVs. And so almost every type of applicant is worried about their demographic, I don't know, somehow being disadvantaged in some way, shape, or form. And so, you know, that's just one of the crazy things, or the quirky things you see, whether you're doing this as a pre-law director or you're doing this in admissions. Everybody thinks that their demographic. And what I would tell you is you've got to find ways to sort of reduce the anxiety here. This is a chance you're taking on yourself. This is something that you've decided is important for you to do. It's the next right step for you, hopefully. And you really do need to sort of think about what you can do, whatever your situation might be, to present yourself in the strongest way possible. And so as it relates to those, we don't have a preference or, you know, or anything, but Dean Ingber likes to say two things. Number one, sometimes work experience is just data. I mean, if we're trying to assess how well-formed the particular applicant is, you know, that additional work experience sometimes just gives us the extra data that maybe we need, right? To maybe make a favorable decision. But that isn't to say, because I think, I want to say around 84% of the class of 2023 took some time off between undergrad and, you know, joining YLS. But it's one of those things where we don't have some sort of active advantage or disadvantage, because there are some people who are applying straight through from undergrad and they're just ready. And it's just obvious that they're ready. And we would be fools, right, to ignore how ready they are. And sometimes it's obvious that they're not only ready, but they're a really strong fit for us. And why would we waste our time, right? They've done the things, they are where we need them to be. And so that's a decision that we just need to ponder and ultimately probably roll in their favor. So I wouldn't, and Dean Ingber also always says, and this is so true, strong applicants tend to only get stronger over time. And so I think the one thing I would always caution anyone who considers himself a non-traditional applicant who's taking time off, and this was a mistake, I would say, an oversight that I would see that was very, very common as a pre-law program director, but I've seen it in applications. Take the application process seriously. Who cares how long you've worked, if you were a doctor or whatever? If we ask you to try and piece together your college activities, then you need to piece that together, and if we're asking you to take the LSAT or the GRE, then you need to take it and take it seriously. And, regardless of what you've done in the last 10 years, because one thing you can assume safely about the rest of the applicant pool is that there's probably a lot of other people like you with unique experiences or whatever who did the things that we asked them to do, just at a core level. And so that's the only thing I would ever say is, like, wherever you are in life and you decide you want to apply to law school, take the process seriously. Understand it's not a hazing process. We really are not trying to torture you. We're absolutely trying to help you help us by asking for what we're asking for, and do the things that we ask you to do and take them seriously. And if it's too much of a chore or too much or too difficult, or you just don't understand or see the point, that too is data, right? And it's probably not the data that's going to, communicate what you would hope to communicate to us. So.
Thank you. I just got, people actually did come back on, so thank you all. Students are requesting your email contact, so if you wouldn't mind dropping it in the chat, we'd appreciate it. But certainly, I know I was cut off in the middle, but I just wanted to, on behalf of the Leadership Brainery and the students who came, to thank Monique, Carla, and John for, again, your candor, your practical advice, your heartfelt advice, as these students are pondering and planning for law school. I also want to take an opportunity to thank all of the students who joined us, that we truly appreciate your questions, and we look forward to you staying in touch with us through the Leadership Brainery. We certainly want to continue to be a support for you throughout this process. I'm now going to turn it back over to Hafsat.
Perfect. I echo everything that Catherine said. Thank you all so much for joining us. I'm pasting a survey in the chat. We would really appreciate it if you all could fill it out. What that survey does is help us plan and program in different ways and help you all out. So if there's something that you wish had happened or something that you wish we'd have talked about, please let us know. Your feedback is extremely valuable to us. Additionally, there is an option for you all to network. And so we recognize that there are a lot of students who signed up for today's event. If you look on the left side of your screen, you'll see a networking tab. When I'm done speaking and when we're all off the stage, please feel free to go in there. What it does is it alternates. Once you click that you're ready, you'll have about 5 minutes to speak with someone. You can speak with anyone, and you can just hop in and out and get to know more of the people who are in the event. Yes, for the question in the chat, there will be a recording posted later. You will all get an email about it. It'll be on our website and our YouTube. And then last but not least, we did promise a raffle to you all, to students who not only signed up for LB Connect, but also who are here for the entire event. And so our raffle winners are Marialis Rosa from Boston University, Toybot Ayankubi from Rutgers University, and Daryl Irvin from Michigan State University. And so we will make sure to follow up with you all after this email. We have your contact info. But thank you all again so much. If you have the time, please head over to networking. But it was amazing being with you today. Bye.